There was a Roman physician named Galen who served under Marcus Aurelius on the battlefield, not as a soldier, as the man who watched soldiers die, not from arrows, not from swords, but from something invisible, something that lived inside them weeks before any battle began. They could not sleep, they could not eat. Their hands would tremble at the sound of distant drums. Their minds would rehearse their own deaths so many times that by the time the battle arrived, some of them were already hollow. Galen called it the anticipation of suffering. He wrote that he had seen men destroyed by wars that never happened, by wounds that were never inflicted, by enemies that existed only in the chambers of their own minds. He was describing anxiety 2,000 years ago on a Roman battlefield. And here is the thing that stopped me when I first read this. Those men were warriors. They had trained their entire lives for physical confrontation. They could hold a shield wall under a rain of spears. But the one enemy they had never been taught to face, the one that lived not outside the fortress wall, but inside their own chest, that was the enemy that undid them. Most people alive today have never stood on a battlefield, but most people alive today know exactly what Galen was describing: the sleepless nights, the racing thoughts at 2 a.m., the body braced for catastrophe that has not arrived and may never arrive, the exhausting work of living in a future that exists only in the mind, a future full of worst cases, full of disasters assembled piece by piece from nothing but fear and imagination. That is anxiety, and it is the invisible war most people are fighting every single day, alone, silently, convinced that something is fundamentally broken in them. Nothing is broken in you, but something needs to change. Not in your circumstances, not in your chemistry, not in some future version of your life when things finally calm down. In how you think, in what you choose to do with the mind you have, starting today. The Stoics understood this with a precision that most modern approaches still have not matched. They did not treat anxiety as a weakness to be ashamed of. They treated it as a philosophical problem, which means it has a philosophical solution, a practical one, a learnable one, 7 steps, tested across 2,000 years of human struggle, and available to you right now, wherever you are sitting. If this is what you have been searching for, comment "calm" because you found it. And before we go any further, if this kind of ancient practical wisdom is what your mind has been hungry for, subscribe right now. Every day on this channel we go deeper into Stoic principles that actually change how you live, not in theory, but in the real, difficult, anxiety-producing moments of a real life. Hit the bell. Send this to someone who needs it today. Now, let us begin. 1. Name the beast. Anxiety cannot survive being seen clearly. The year is 65 AD. The philosopher Seneca, not the quote-on-a-poster version of Seneca, but the real one, the one who was ordered by Nero to take his own life, sat down in his final weeks and wrote something that had nothing to do with death and everything to do with fear. He wrote to a friend, "There are more things likely to frighten us than there are to crush us. We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Not a man on a stage performing wisdom, a man facing his own execution, writing about fear from experience. And what he identified, what the Stoics understood deeply, is that anxiety is not one thing. It is a collection of things that have been allowed to blur together into a single, overwhelming fog. And fog, by its nature, cannot be fought. It has no edges. It has no center. You cannot put your hands around it. The first step to calming anxiety is not breathing exercises. It is not positive thinking. It is radical, unflinching clarity about what you are actually afraid of. Not everything, not the fog, the specific thing. Here is how this works in practice. When anxiety rises, and it will rise, that is not a failure. That is being human. Instead of running from it or drowning in it, you sit with it long enough to ask one question. What specifically am I afraid will happen? Not generally, specifically. Not everything will go wrong. What thing? On what day? To whom? With what consequence? Write it down if you have to. The act of translating formless dread into written, specific language does something neurologically real. The fog becomes a sentence, and a sentence can be examined. A sentence can be tested against reality. A sentence can be shown to be either true or false. The Stoics called this prosos, watchful attention to the contents of one's own mind, not to judge it, not to suppress it, to see it clearly, without flinching. You cannot address what you refuse to name. You cannot solve what you insist on experiencing only as atmosphere. Name the beast, look directly at it, give it a sentence. That is where every other step begins. If you have ever felt paralyzed by fear you could not name, comment, "I see it now," because naming is the first act of freedom. 2. Separate what is yours from what is not. Here is a question nobody asks you when anxiety is at its worst. Is this actually mine? Not? Is this real? Not? Is this valid? But, does this belong to me? Is this a problem inside my control? Or am I carrying weight that was never mine to carry? The Stoic philosopher Epictetus, the man who was enslaved, who had his leg broken by his master as a demonstration of ownership, who responded by saying calmly, "You will break it," built his entire philosophy on one foundational division. He called it the dichotomy of control. And it is one of the most practically useful ideas ever written down. Some things are up to us. Some things are not. What is up to us? Our judgments, our intentions, our choices, our responses, our effort. What is not up to us? Other people's decisions, other people's opinions of us, outcomes, timing, circumstances, the past, the weather, the economy, the health of people we love, whether we are understood, whether we are appreciated, whether things go the way we planned. Most anxiety, not all but most, is the result of spending enormous mental energy on the second list while neglecting the first. The person lying awake at 3 a.m. afraid of what their employer will decide. That decision is not on the first list. The preparation, the quality of the work, the email that was sent, those are. The person sick with dread about whether someone they love will be safe. The safety of another person is not on the first list. The care, the communication, the presence, those are. This is not cold. This is not indifference. This is the most practical act of self-preservation available to a human being, returning your energy to the ground where it can actually do something. The Stoics did not practice this because they did not care. They practiced it because they cared enough to show up with full capacity where their effort could actually land. Draw the line. Tonight, before you sleep, take the thing that is consuming you and ask honestly, which part of this is mine? Take that part, work it, release the rest, not forever, just for tonight. Repeat tomorrow. If this distinction has ever changed how you see your own worries, comment, "Not mine to carry," because releasing what was never yours is not giving up, it is accuracy. 3. Meet the worst case, then make peace with it. This one will feel counterintuitive. Most advice about anxiety tells you to redirect your thinking away from worst-case scenarios. Think positive. Focus on what could go right. Visualize success. The Stoics said something almost exactly opposite. They said, go to the worst case. Go there deliberately. Go there in full daylight, not in the 3 a.m. dark. Sit with it, examine it, make it specific. And then ask yourself one question. Can I survive this? They called this practice premeditatio malorum, the deliberate premeditation of adversity. And it was not a pessimism exercise, it was an inoculation. Here is the mechanism. Anxiety draws its power almost entirely from vagueness and surprise. The mind, when it catches a glimpse of possible catastrophe in peripheral vision, amplifies it. It becomes monstrous because it is never fully seen. It grows because it is never fully examined. When you walk toward it deliberately, when you sit down and say, let us say this actually happens. Let us say I lose the job. Let us say the relationship ends. Let us say the diagnosis is what I fear it is. And you think it all the way through, something remarkable happens. The monster stops growing, not because the worst case is not bad. Some worst cases are genuinely bad. But because the mind, once it has walked through the valley and found that it can still breathe on the other side, stops being afraid of the valley. The Stoic writer Boethius, imprisoned, stripped of everything, awaiting execution, wrote in his cell something called The Consolation of Philosophy. Not a record of despair, a work of extraordinary calm, reasoning about fortune, loss, and what remains when everything external is removed. He had sat with his worst case. He had walked all the way through it. And what he found on the other side was not nothing. It was the realization that the core of him, the thinking, choosing, meaning-making part of him, had not been touched by any of it. What is the worst case you are afraid to look at directly? Look at it, all the way through. Then ask, what of me remains on the other side of this? The answer will be more than you think. If this practice shifts something in you, comment, I walked through it, because the other side of fear is not what most people expect. 4. Return to the body. The mind cannot outrun what the body is holding. Everything we have discussed so far is philosophical, cognitive, the work of the thinking mind applied to itself. But here is something the Stoics understood that modern anxiety treatment is only recently catching up to. The mind and the body are not two separate systems with a polite relationship. They are one system. And when the body is locked in a state of sustained physical alarm, which is what chronic anxiety does, it keeps the nervous system in permanent low-grade emergency. No amount of philosophical reasoning can fully reach it. You cannot think your way out of a physiological state. You have to move through it. The Stoics were not sedentary philosophers. Marcus Aurelius campaigned on horseback for years. Epictetus walked. Cato, the Stoic senator, famously walked barefoot through the snow, not as performance, but as practice. Practice in tolerating discomfort. Practice in proving to the body that it could handle more than it believed. Here is the practical application. When anxiety is acute, when the heart is fast, when the chest is tight, when the mind is spinning, the first and most effective intervention is not a thought, it is a breath. Specifically, a breath where the exhale is deliberately longer than the inhale. 4 counts in, 6 to 8 counts out. This is not a wellness trend. It is a direct intervention in the autonomic nervous system. The extended exhale activates the parasympathetic branch, the one that signals to the body, the emergency is over, you can stand down. The second intervention is movement, not vigorous, not urgent, deliberate. A walk, not to get somewhere, to be somewhere, to be in a body that is moving through the world rather than a mind spinning inside a room. The Stoic practice of ascesis, voluntary physical discipline, was not punishment, it was maintenance. It was the regular practice of proving to the body that it was capable, that discomfort was survivable, that the physical self was not as fragile as anxiety insisted. Your body is not your enemy in this. It is alarmed. It has been alarmed for a long time. It needs to be shown, not told, shown, that the danger has passed. Move, breathe, return. If your body has been carrying what your mind refuses to put down, comment, I return to now, because the body is always living in the present, even when the mind refuses to. 5. Shrink time. You are not living in today. You are living in everything at once. The ancient Greek philosopher Antisthenes, teacher of Diogenes, deeply influential on the foundations of Stoicism, said something so simple it almost sounds dismissive until you sit with it for a while. The most useful piece of learning for the use of life is to unlearn what is untrue. What most anxious people need to unlearn is the belief that they are required to live in all of their time simultaneously. The future has not arrived. The past cannot be changed. There is only one unit of time available for actual living, for actual decision, for actual action, now. This hour, this task, this conversation, this breath. Anxiety is almost always a time problem dressed as an emotional problem. It is the mind insisting on living in a future it cannot know, while simultaneously being haunted by a past it cannot alter. And doing both while standing in a present that actually needs attention. Here is the practice. When the mind begins its characteristic sprint into the future, into the what-ifs and what-thens and what happens if, you interrupt it, not with force, with a question. What is the one thing in front of me right now that actually needs my attention? Not tomorrow's problem. Not next month's worst case. The thing in front of you right now. A Stoic general on campaign did not spend the night before battle rehearsing every possible defeat across the next 5 years of war. He asked, what does tonight require? What does this morning require? He lived at the edge of the present, which is the only place a human being actually has power. The future will arrive, one day at a time. You will meet each of those days when they come, with whatever you have built in yourself by then. You do not need to meet them tonight. Give tonight only to tonight. If you catch yourself trying to live in 5 places at once, comment, one day, because presence is where anxiety loses its grip. 6. Build something larger than your fear. There is a particular kind of anxiety that no breathing exercise and no time-shrinking practice will fully touch, and it is the deepest kind. It is the anxiety that comes not from any specific threat, but from the quiet, persistent feeling that your life does not have sufficient weight, that you are filling days without building anything, that the routine is consuming you rather than you directing it, that there is no story, no direction, no meaning, into which the difficult days fit. The philosopher Aristotle, not a Stoic, but deeply aligned with what the Stoics practiced, identified that human beings suffer a specific kind of anguish when they are separated from eudaimonia, the sense of living toward something, of activity aligned with one's deepest capacities and values. The Stoics framed this as telos, purpose, and they were specific, not vague purpose, not general positivity, but a clearly held understanding of what you are for, what you are building, who is depending on you to stay intact. Here is why this matters for anxiety. A person with a compelling reason to remain composed will find composure. A person with a deep investment in their own presence, who understands that their steadiness is not just for themselves, but for their children, their work, their community, their growth. That person does not have the luxury of being permanently undone by anxiety. This is not suppression. This is redirection. The Stoics practiced acceptance of fate not because suffering is enjoyable, but because the person who has found meaning can receive difficulty as material rather than as destruction. The difficulty becomes part of the building. What are you building? Not abstractly, concretely. What is the thing that when you imagine it complete, the family more whole, the work more honest, the person you are becoming, makes the hard days feel like they belong to something? Find that, protect it, return to it when anxiety tells you that nothing matters and nothing will work and everything is too much. Everything being too much is sometimes just the friction of building something real. If you have found your reason to remain, comment, "I am building," because purpose is the ground anxiety cannot hollow out. 7. Choose your company. The atmosphere you live in is not neutral. The last step is the one most people resist because it requires something harder than a practice. It requires a decision. The Stoic philosopher Musonius Rufus, Epictetus's own teacher, a man whose writings most people have never encountered because they are buried under more famous names, wrote something that deserves far more attention than it receives. Consider carefully whom you associate with. The character of those we habitually spend time with becomes, over years, indistinguishable from our own. He was making a point that cuts through everything else we have discussed today. You can do all 6 of the previous steps with discipline and sincerity. You can name your fears, release what is not yours, walk through your worst cases, breathe through the physical alarm, return yourself to the present, and build a life of genuine purpose. And still find your anxiety replenished daily if you are immersed in an atmosphere designed to produce it. You become, to a remarkable degree, the average of what you are immersed in. Not through weakness, through the basic mechanics of how human nervous systems function. The person who spends hours each day consuming anxious media, anxious conversations, the unending scroll of catastrophe and manufactured outrage, that person is not neutral. They are being shaped continuously by what they have chosen to let inside. The Stoics were deliberate about their input. Marcus Aurelius was careful about who sat at his table. Epictetus chose his students with intention. Cato was known for leaving gatherings that had become corrupting in their conversation, not out of superiority, but out of self-preservation. This is not about abandoning people who are struggling. It is about being honest about the cumulative weight of what you allow to fill your mind every single day. Audit your atmosphere, the accounts you follow, the conversations you return to, the media you consume before sleep, the voices you allow to be the last things your mind processes before it attempts to rest. Not everything deserves access to your inner world. And the inverse is equally essential. Actively seek the company. In person or in reading, in community or in solitude. of people and ideas that make the world feel navigable, that remind you of human capacity rather than human fragility, that restore the sense that difficulty is workable and life is worth the full engagement of your best self. Your calm is not just a feeling, it is a resource. It is what you have to offer the people who depend on you. It is the foundation of every good decision you will make. Protect it accordingly. If you are committing to protecting your inner atmosphere, comment, "My peace is protected," because what you consistently allow inside becomes, over time, who you are. 7 steps. Let me say them plainly before we close. Name what you are actually afraid of. Give the fog a sentence it cannot hide inside. Separate what is yours to carry from what was never yours to begin with. Walk deliberately toward the worst case in daylight, so it loses its power to ambush you in the dark. Return to the body because the mind cannot reason its way out of a physiological alarm. It must be shown through breath and movement that the danger has passed. Shrink time back to today, to this hour, to this task, because anxiety is almost always the cost of trying to live in all your time simultaneously. Build something larger than your fear, a purpose substantial enough to make your composure feel necessary rather than optional. And protect the atmosphere of your inner world, because what you are immersed in daily is not passive background. It is active instruction. None of these steps require perfect conditions. None require that life become easier before you begin. They require only what the Stoics always required: the willingness to turn toward difficulty rather than away from it, and to apply the only tool that has ever genuinely worked: a disciplined, honest, courageous mind. Anxiety is not your character. It is not your destiny. It is not evidence that you are too weak for this life. It is a pattern of thinking. Learnable, which means it is also unlearnable. It was built over time, through repetition. It can be dismantled the same way. Not overnight, not in a single video, but today. With the next thought you choose, with the next breath you take deliberately, with the next moment you return yourself from the imagined future to the real present, you begin. Musonius Rufus wrote, and this is perhaps the most honest thing ever said about the work of becoming calmer and more yourself. If you accomplish something good with hard work, the labor passes quickly, but the good endures. The work of calming anxiety is hard. It requires honesty about yourself that is not always comfortable. It requires returning to practices that feel small against the size of what you are carrying. But the labor passes, and the calm that is built through it, the genuine, earned, tested calm that nobody can take from you because nobody gave it to you, that endures. It becomes who you are. Subscribe if you want to keep building it. New Stoic principles applied to the real weight of real life every single day. This channel exists for the person who is done just surviving their own mind and is ready to start directing it. And if this video reached someone at exactly the right moment, send it to them. That costs you nothing and may change their entire week. If you are ready to begin, comment, "My calm starts now." The anxiety does not own you. It never did. Go prove it.